Welcome back, Richard. It's good to see you.
Morning. How are you?
I am doing well. Here we are in May. It's our first weekend of May, and it's here in Florida at least, or most of Florida, I guess, at least. It's the last month of the school year, and everybody is ready for school to be over this year. The year has gone really fast.
Right. It seems as though it has, and I'm sure that anybody who's involved in schooling, parents, teachers, it seems as though this year went by in a hurry. We're all still catching up from the pandemic and all that, but lots of news and education, lots of changes coming for the next school year. But this one went by quickly.
It sure did.
Kentucky Derby has been run, and first Saturday of May, and here we are in May, and got to get ready because what happens in June in Florida? It's the beginning of hurricane season.
I was gonna say it gets hot. It's already getting hot.
So we got to use May to prepare for hurricane season, which I thought ended earlier, but it's about 4 or 5 months long, right? Hurricane season lasts till November. So
right.
So lots going on. So here we are in May and almost the end of the school year, and we're going to talk about teenagers today.
Yes, we are. We're good. There's been a number of articles that's come out recently about teenagers, and of course, teenagers make up a lot of the population of patients that we see here. Right. Well, at least families of teenagers.
Right.
Parents often bring their teenagers in, and it's one of the most challenging initial visits to have, because so often parents bring teenagers in and the teenager doesn't want to be here.
Oh boy, do they ever.
It often happens. The teenager doesn't want to be here, and the parents drag them in, and many times just bring them into the office and say, fix them. There's something wrong. Right. And we've even had families look at the teenager and say, he is the problem in the family.
Right.
And so we're going to talk about some of those challenges this year and in this podcast, and really emphasize having some of those really difficult conversations that we have to have with our teenagers sometimes.
That's right. And finding that space and that's what we're going to talk about today with a couple of podcasts that we're going to invest some time. We're going to invest a little time and energy in finding that place where we're giving up control, but we're still we're still being present. Okay. Right. That's a delicate balance for parents to find. It's not easy. The teenage years. The teenage years are especially challenging. Every stage has its challenges. I mean, raising an infant, getting a kid ready for kindergarten, getting through elementary school. Each period has its challenges, but for some reasons, the teen years seem to be especially challenging. And teenagers just seem to find many ways to step on our last nerve, okay? But we want to begin with a couple of reminders. Number one, a teenager is not just a bigger 10-year-old.
Right.
Okay. So you can't use the same kind of, we call it monitor and control, that you can do with a 7 or 8-year-old. If you have a 3rd or 4th grader, you can monitor their schoolwork, you can monitor their behavior, you can monitor their sleep, you can monitor their eating, and you can control all that stuff. But a teenager is not just a bigger child. They are a different species altogether, and you have to start thinking about them as though they are different.
That's right.
And they're not adults.
That's right.
So you still need to be a guiding and very patient presence in their lives to help them through this transition. You have to think of the teenage years as a transition from childhood to adulthood. And it's not always an easy transition. It's difficult for most kids get through it, but without too many wounds. But it is a difficult transition. And at some point in the transition, you have to let go. You have to let go of control, and the sooner you do that, the better. Okay.
Right. And we've talked in previous podcasts about detachment parenting, for example. During the early years of childhood, we really focus on attachment parenting, where you're building and nurturing that
Right.
connection between you and your child. But by the time they're reaching adolescence and really in the preteen years, maybe starting around 11 or 12, you're
Right.
going to want to start to detach, allowing them more liberties to go out and, let's be honest, to go out and make mistakes,
Go out
to
and make some mistakes. Right.
experiment and attempt new things. And part of the reason why that's so important, and part of the reason why adolescence is so challenging, is because there's several things that occur during adolescence that are relatively unique.
That's right.
At least unique in that it hasn't happened previously since they were two or about to.
Right.
And that is, one of the things is that their brain undergoes a number of changes.
Right.
New neurons are developed, and there's more competence, so there's more skills, there's more understanding, but also there's more chemicals, and there's more chaos, and there's more uncertainty in their brain, all at the same time. So at the same time that they're feeling more competent and more wanting to gain that more independence, they're also less sure about things. They're also sometimes insecure about things, and all of this is happening at the same time.
Right.
So it can lead to a lot of confusion for kids, for teenagers.
Right. Right. And what parents have to remember as you get ready for these teenage years, and you can feel them coming. I mean, you get to later elementary school, and as you're approaching middle school, you can feel the child beginning to change. And that brain change that occurs at puberty, that's what creates a very different child. The child you get after puberty is very different than the child you had prior to puberty. Right. Things are going on in their brain that are all new, and you need to accommodate to this new person, the new person. The second thing that's happening beside the brain changing is this is the period in their lives when they're deciding who they are.
Right.
People say, well, what is all this gender? We have always done that. I mean, there's nothing new about gender identity. This has been going on for thousands of years, that following puberty, kids begin to make decisions about who they are. And we call that identity development. Mm-hmm. And in the teenage years, a child either develops a clear sense of who they are, or they're confused about who they are. And so the other struggle they have, besides the brain struggle and being impelled to do what adults think of as crazy things, in addition to them being impelled to do those things, they're also struggling with their identity. Who am I? What do I want to be? Am I any good at anything? And that's all going on too. So this is a unique period in our species. The period from puberty to age 20 or 21 is a unique time in our species. And we have to deal with the teenager that we have then. And because it's different from the child that we have been raising for the past 10 or 11 years.
Yeah. And I think that's that stage that you're talking about, that where they're trying to develop their identity, is really critical, because right. if they don't, if you think about the cascading events, if the parent doesn't let go and doesn't allow the teenager to explore and figure out who they are, sort of independent of the parent,
right,
then that identity develop is stifled. It's slowed or even stopped.
Right.
The point that, this is why we see a lot of now 20-year-olds who have no idea who they are. They don't know what they want, where they're going, what they stand for, what they believe. They don't know any of those things, because to that point, they've just been told what to do, what to be, right. who they mm-hmm. are. They've been told all of that for all of their life. And so they haven't had that opportunity to develop that. And it's just really important that parents understand that how your teenager turns out has more to do with the teenager than it does with you.
Absolutely. And we have to emphasize that over and over and over again. How they turn out is more about the child than the parent. Right. No matter what you do. And you have to give your child a chance to go through this discovery. You have to give them the opportunity. Yes, it's dangerous. Yes, it's risky, but you have to give them that, because parents cannot control how their kids turn out. I don't care what you do.
Right.
Eventually, the person is going to become the person.
Right. I mean, we know there are several people that we know personally who, they seem to have done so much with their children as they were growing up, and then as they worked through adolescence,
Right.
their teenagers became very different people, and now even as young adults, they're very different than what they would have looked like, as children. And
Right.
so, where kids wind up is really a manifestation of who they are and how they work through that process of
Mhm.
identity development, and just the interconnections of their biology with their social relationships and all these other things.
Right.
And for the most part, parents really need to back off and get out of the way of some of that.
That's right. Right. We see it. One of the classic examples of this is the dad who wants his child to be an athlete.
Right.
And so they do everything they can, and then the child gets to age 12 or 13 and quits. That's
Right.
not what the child wanted. A child didn't want to be a linebacker. He wanted to be a ballet dancer. They're going to quit.
Right. And how many times have we seen, parents come in with their, and for listeners, recognize that we live in Central Florida, parents come in driving, very large, four-wheel drive pickup trucks with, deer, it's the other meat bumper stickers and things like that. And the kid comes in and wants to be a vegetarian. Um,
Right.
and it's because they just want to be different than what they've had and what they've been
They
their whole
want and they want to explore who they are.
life.
These are my parents. I'm not my parents. I'm somebody else. I'm independent. I'm unique. I want to explore who I am. I want to find out who I am. That's what they're not being disobedient or defiant. They're simply pursuing who they are. Okay?
Right.
And
So
so,
while they're not ready yet to make big major decisions, they're not ready to take on that. And so that's why we don't let 14-year-olds get tattoos and things like that.
right,
And we don't really let 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds quit school and do those kinds of things. We have to let them make some decisions in their life,
that's right.
all while recognizing that they are also at a heightened risk for challenges, mental health challenges, but also physical dangers and things like that. Because my goodness, you're going to put a 16-year-old behind the wheel of a car.
Right. That's right. And so that's that spot that we're talking about, is that how do I allow my child to explore, to go out there and make some mistakes and find out who you are, and at the same time keeping them safe. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're looking for. Because we have to remember that at age 6, we say, well, by 18, a child should be independent and be able to manage on their own. No. Let's go back to 16, 15 or 16, because once you hand your child the keys to the car,
Right.
you can monitor where they are,
Mm-hmm.
but you can't control what they do.
Right.
So that by age 16, you're no longer in control. You
Right.
might control some things. Okay. You can take their cell phone, but once you hand them the keys to the car, or once they get in the car with a friend,
Mm-hmm.
you're not there anymore.
Right.
So you have to have accomplished this task by the time they're about 15 or 16, because they're going to go places and you're not going to be there. Okay. Which is different from when your child was 9 or 10. You were always present. Okay.
Right.
From age 16. So whatever you're going to accomplish, whatever you want to accomplish with this child to make sure the child is making good decisions, you have until they're about 16.
Yeah. And so as we mentioned, adolescence is this time of turmoil. There's these brain changes that are happening both structurally and chemically.
Mhm.
There's hormonal changes. Puberty is happening all at the same time, and so they are also at a heightened risk for mental health problems.
Right.
Let's
Mhm.
not forget that young adults, 18 to 25, have the highest prevalence of mental health
That's right.
concerns of any really any age group, and suicide is the fourth leading cause of death globally
Mhm.
for teenagers. So mental health issues are very prevalent during this stage. Not And it's not foreboding that, just because they have some mental health issues going on during adolescence, that it's going to be with them for the rest of their life. That's certainly not the case. But while they're going through this turmoil, this
Right.
adolescence, they are likely to experience some of these challenges, which is going to make it more difficult for parents and more difficult for that parent-child relationship.
Right. But what you have to be careful of is what we call the parent trap. Don't fall for the parent trap, because we know that kids are at risk, because their school performance is going to go up and down, and they're going to change from day. Because we know all that, parents are always tempted to grab the reins and regain control. By God, I'm going to regain control of this. My child is getting defiant. My child is making bad decisions. So by golly, I know what's best, and I'm going to take control. If you insist on control, you're going to risk damaging the relationship that you have with your child. Your child needs to be able to make some mistakes to become competent. And they're going to want to be able to do that without too much interference and too much control. Right. And so you're going to risk damaging that relationship with your child. And what they're going to do is, if the more the parent tries to impose control, the more the child will circumvent those rules, right, or they will simply withdraw emotionally. And we have kids who come in here and say, it doesn't matter what I do. Right. I'm going to get punished. I know that my mother's going to find something wrong. If I do these 10 things right, it doesn't matter, because she's going to find some reason to regain, to take control, to take my phone. It's a no-win. There's nothing I can do about it. And so the child withdraws emotionally from the parent-child relationship. Nobody wants that, or no parent wants that. You can have control, but you're going to pay a price for it.
Right. Yeah. And there's always the lack of understanding, it seems, with some parents, where they are working so hard to keep that, to keep hold of the reins, to keep tight control over their teenager. Right. Mm-hmm. While at the same time, like, truly believing that in 2 years, when the kid is 18 and graduates high school, that the kid is going to move away and do great at this high performing college, this demanding college, and they think, well, my kid won't do any of their schoolwork or anything here in high school without me being all over them all the time. But yeah, we're gonna pay $10,000 a semester and send them away to a college, and he'll be perfectly successful there.
Right.
What evidence do we have that that's going to be the case? Because you're not allowing him to build the skills that he's going to need to be successful at that school.
That's right. And that's what we mean by detachment parenting. Right. You have to back out of the relationship as the child gets older and the risks get higher and the consequences are bigger. You have to back out. You have to have the courage to let the child develop. Right. We know it's risky, but you have to allow the child to develop competence, and they're not going to develop that competence unless they have the freedom to do so. If you demand to have control, your child is not going to be able to develop that competence that he's going to need when they go off to college, when they drive a car, when they're at a party and they've had too much to drink. What do you want? What kind of relationship do you want to have? Do you want your child to be able to call you and say, hey, look, I've had too much to drink? Or do you want them to be afraid to tell you that they've had too much to drink? Okay. So part of all of this, part of this role of parenting, our teenagers, is having conversations with them about some of these things. We want our teenagers to feel comfortable coming to us and talking to us about things. And as you just said, in that perfect example, either your child is going to feel comfortable coming to you and talking to you about some things. There will still be lots of things that they will not come and talk to you about. Right. Just be aware of that. But if we want them to be able to come to us and talk to us about issues,
or that we can bring things up with them. We have to be able to manage some of these difficult conversations. And so some of the information we pulled from one of the articles in the that's in the show notes is, some steps that parents can take to think about, at least when having these difficult conversations.
Right. Yeah.
And the
Whether
first
it's
thing
about
is,
drugs or, yeah.
right. Yeah, exactly. Whether it's about drugs or relationships or schooling or whatever it's about. But the first thing to consider is using neutral, factual types of information. Parents so often throw so much emotion into conversations with their teenagers, which makes it more about the parent than about what's going on with the teenager. And the parent just keeps talking and talking and talking. And so the parent, one of the things that's encouraged is parents to use neutral, sort of factual information, and then stop talking and see what the teenager does from there. Do they take responsibility, or do they try to talk themselves out of it? What happens after that factual information is presented? But parents have to stop talking to be able to get to that.
How many times, Bernie, have parents come in and say, I found a vape pen in the bedroom, and by God, I'm going to slam the door on this one.
Right.
No, you're not. You're not going to slam anything. It's at that moment that all you have to do is say, sweetheart, found this vape pen in your bedroom, in your backpack, and then stop talking. See how the child responds. What does the child say? Do they take responsibility? I'll tell you what they're going to say. Oh, that's not mine. That's a friend of mine. I'm just carrying it around. No, that's his. It wouldn't be in his backpack if it wasn't his or hers. See what they say. See if they take responsibility. You want to know if your child is going to start accepting responsibility for their behavior. That's why they can't be afraid to talk to you. If they're afraid of you taking their cell phone because you found a vape pen, they're going to lie. They're going to tell you whatever they think you want to hear to avoid the punishment. Okay. Don't go down that path.
Right.
Start with a neutral, factual observation. Sweetheart, I found this vape pen in your backpack. Then please don't say anything after that. See what the child is going to say and give them a chance to explain themselves. Right. You don't have to do anything else. Just have that conversation.
When families come into our office, and many times for our first sessions, we'll have both the teenager and the parent in the office at the same time, and just to kind of, hey, what's going on? Why are you guys here? And it's during that first 5 or 10 minutes of a session that you can see exactly how these dynamics work in the family. Right. Because if I ask a teenager, so what brings you here today? And we sit there in silence. And for about 5 or 10 seconds, and then all of a sudden the parent jumps in and starts talking for the teenager. Now I know that the parent is primarily doing the talking. Right. The parent is the one that's talking at the teenager, and the teenager just stands there. And so if you have that type of history with your teenager, if you decide, okay, hey, these sound like some good steps that we're going to start implementing in our home with our teenager, and you find that you make a statement like, hey, buddy, I found this vape pen in your backpack. Tell me what's going on. They just stand there in silence. That's a good indication that you should have that says you've been doing too much talking in the past. Right. Because if they know that all I have to do is stand here and be quiet for a few minutes, and then she's just going to keep going. Right. So he's not going to say anything. And you're right. He's going to put it off that it's, a friend's or someone else's. That doesn't mean that you pounce and say, okay, you're lying to me and you're doing this, you're doing that. We're not accusing, we're not jumping to those kinds of things, but we're just listening and being cognizant of what they're saying and what they're suggesting in their comment, in the response. Right.
Yeah. Now so that's how you open up these conversations. Just state what you found. A friend of mine found a can of snuff. His son was in college. I think he had gone off to college, and they were packing his stuff, and out falls this can of snuff. And the dad just put it on his dresser and just put a little note on it. And that was all there was. And that's all, but that's all that was needed. And the son stopped using it. Eventually he stopped using it. The second thing is a little harder for many parents, and that is that when you ask questions, try to ask questions that invite a conversation. Remember, during the adolescent years, you're moving from an adult-child relationship to an adult-adult relationship. So what you want to do is you want to ask a question that invites the child into the conversation rather than challenging them to give you the answer that you want. You know that. And so think of your teenager not as a child, but pretend that you're talking to an adult. What kind of a question would you ask if you were talking to another adult? Okay?
Right.
And that's how you should be talking to your teenager, because you want to create an adult-adult relationship, not an adult-child relationship.
Right. And so it could go something like, you know, hey, buddy, I found this vape pen in your backpack. Can you tell me a little bit more about what's going on? Oh, it's not mine. You know, Richard gave it to me and he asked me to hold on to it.
Right. That's the first thing you're going to hear.
Right. And you say, okay, well, can you tell me what's going on? Is everything okay with Richard? Or,
right.
You know, but what do you think might happen if somebody at school finds that in your backpack?
Right.
You know, I'm a little bit worried about what could happen if somebody found it in your backpack when you were holding it for Richard.
What do you think will happen? What do you think will happen? Now you're inviting the child to talk.
Right. Now, and I'm not saying it in an accusatory way. Oh, what do you think is going to happen when somebody, you know, when I find this or when I do this, or when you're not doing it like that. You're showing some concern, because we should be concerned in these situations.
Yeah, you could say what is the school's policy on this? Have they talked to you about this at school? If they find a pen in your, you know, what have they told you? What are the school policies on this? Yeah. Okay, well, then you're taking a little bit of a risk. Does this put you at risk? You know, and the child may say, no, it's not a problem. We don't do this. We don't have that. But if the child later in the day gets caught and they get a consequence, say, oh, okay, that's the child's consequence. Okay, that's how you learn this stuff.
Right. And then bringing in that the third step with this is using reflections, or, you know, repeating back so that you make sure that you understand. So it sounds like what you're saying is that, you know, whatever Richard's going through, you know, he had this vape pen and he was worried that he was going to get in trouble. And so he asked you to hold on to it. But it sounds like, you know, helping him get out of trouble, maybe putting you in a position that could get you in trouble.
Right.
You know, have you thought about how you're going to handle something like that? Again, asking them what their problem solving is, and then stop talking.
Right. Stop talking. Yes. Let them talk.
Out of it.
Let them talk. I think that's the biggest mistake we all make as parents, is we want to get our perspective, which is what the fourth step is. We want to get our perspective. We want to regain control. We hit that panic button and we want to regain control, when we should do everything you can to get the child talking to you about their perspective.
Exactly. Yeah. So, you know, you work towards ending it by saying, you know, well, I just want you to know that, you know, when I found it, it made me a little bit concerned. I'm a little bit worried, you know, about what's going on with you, and, you know, hoping that you don't get in trouble or have any problems because I found this in here. But, you know, so I just wanted you to know what's happening, that I found it, and, you know, let me know, please talk to me when other things are going on, or, you know, can you talk to Richard and get this back to him so that, you know, you don't get into trouble, and, you know, that you stay safe.
And you don't need to have the child admit that they're vaping. Believe me. Okay. Right. Clearly it's their pen, they're vaping. You already know that. So you don't have to go down that path with them. You already know what you're looking for. They're vaping. Okay. Right. Hopefully they're not vaping cannabis or some other drug, but you now know that they're vaping. And now you can have a conversation about that. But all you can do is have a conversation, because the last step in this process, the fifth step, is you have to acknowledge that you're not in control. By the way, your teenager already knows you're not in control. Right. They know that you can't control their vaping. Right. So let's both acknowledge that. Right. Again, this is that adult relationship. Okay. Your teen already knows you can't do anything about their vaping. Right. So but you want to give them the responsibility that they already possess. They already have the responsibility.
Mhm.
You want to give it back. You want to make sure that it's their decision. You're not going to do anything about it. You
Right.
cannot do anything about that.
Right. So backing away from that, that tendency to overcompensate by applying more rules. And you know what? Then you're not going to talk to Richard anymore, or you can't go out with Richard. That's you can't stop them from talking to a friend especially if that friend goes to their school. I mean,
Right.
are you going to stop them from going to school?
Yeah, no.
And so, so again, back away from those urges, because parents really want to lock that down and just say, hey, I really hope that you're able to handle this, and let me know if you need any help handling it, because I think that this is can be kind of serious, and the trouble that you can get in is kind of serious. Now, if you find that vape pen again the next week, and then the next week, and then the next week, okay, now your conversation is going to be different because now we're having a pervasive problem. But that's not going to happen most of the time. Not with most kids, that's not going to be the way that it works out.
Right.
So
that's right. And I was going to make a point, and I forgot what. Yeah, I started to listen to you, and I forgot what I was going to say. Finish what you were saying. No, if you. Oh, I know what it was. If you're a parent and you find yourself saying things like, by God, I'm going to take everything out of his room and take the door off the hinges, you know that you're headed in exactly the wrong direction. That's the first clue. When you have an urge to slam down on these kids, that by God, I'm going to get control of this once and for all. When you feel yourself, when you feel those feelings emerging, that's when you know you're headed in exactly the wrong direction. That's the time to stop and come in, get some perspective, and let's rework this thing, because you're headed in a direction that's not going to work for you or your teenager.
That's right. So we're not asking that you surrender everything and give over everything to the teenager. We're not asking or expecting anybody to do that. Right. However, you have to adjust to the new types of relationships that you have to be built. You need to build during adolescence, and you have to use some slightly different strategies than you would have used if they were 8 years old. Now that they're 15 or 16 years old, you have to use different strategies. Yeah. You just have to, because their brain is different, their perspective is different, and their life is different now as in adolescence than it was as a child.
That's right. So keep in mind, what we're saying is they're not adults yet. We acknowledge that. We're not dealing with just a little adult. So we're not asking you to give them the reins and say, here, just go ahead and live your life. No, they're not ready. Right. Excuse me.
Bless you. Goodness.
Allergy season. We're not saying because they're not adults. And we're also saying they're not children. Right. Okay. So don't treat them as though, don't give them the reins, but don't try to control. There's some place between those two where you have to parent differently when you have a teenager.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, that is it for today. We'll talk more about teenagers in the coming weeks for fun times. So until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, and forget to be afraid.